All right, welcome to part 3. Here, I'll discuss some approaches to laying out your LMS, and I'll show you 3 examples of classes that I think effectively facilitate student access to the posted materials. I've always suspected that the people who designed Google Classroom are trying to make it look like a social network, particularly the stream page, which really feels like an Instagram or Twitter feed for your class. However, as with Twitter or Instagram, posts that are more than a few days old can kind of get buried at the bottom of the stream, and if we overload it, our posts start to feel ephemeral or skippable, so we need to curate them. When I first started teaching with Google Classroom, I posted new materials every day, and I was using different kinds of assignments like questions, assignments, announcements. Quizzes weren't a thing at the time, but I probably would have used them too. And students were always asking me where to find the work for today. Or even worse, a student who was falling behind and already struggling with the classwork itself couldn't find the work they were missing because I kept posting new stuff, and that's not good. Another big issue with that approach is that it packs the student's to-do list with tons of tasks. And to make matters worse, that to-do list contains all the assignments from all their other teachers as well that are using Google Classroom. I've had advisees in my homeroom show me their to-do lists with more than 500 tasks. Sometimes 200 are overdue. And as an adult who struggles to manage more than 3 or 4 tasks on a single day, I just think that's downright cruel. So let's be considerate of our students' to-do lists and their sanity. Just because Google Classroom has all the great features that we looked at in parts 1 and 2 doesn't mean you need to use them. I strongly recommend picking the ones that resonate with you and opting not to use the rest. I certainly find that as I work and get more experience using Google Classroom, I'm using fewer and fewer of the tools and features, and my classrooms are getting better and better organized. So as you're thinking about which features and tools would work best for you and the best way to lay your work out, consider the way that you roll out materials to your students and the time that they spend working on any particular project or topic or piece of classwork. So here are 3 possible examples that you can draw from. And my hope is that these different formats will give you a sense of what might work best for your class. The first example is a Google Classroom that's updated every day with new materials. And this is the kind that didn't really work for me, but I have seen other teachers pulling it off really well. The key here is to stick to a consistent routine every day or every time you post something new so that students know what to expect. Don't mix and match between questions and quizzes and announcements and everything like that. Keep your posts in the same format every day so there's never any confusion about what is posted and where. I think this model would work really well for something like a math class where new material is presented on a regular basis. What I've done here is to put a single quiz assignment post for each class session. So the post contains a quiz with a do now question and a classwork document that's attached to create a copy for each student, and then another document that also creates a copy for each student as homework. They're named clearly so that students know which one is which and which one to do in class and which one to do at home. Some posts might also contain a view-only file for reference if I need that for whatever is being taught that day, although I wouldn't recommend, just in general, I wouldn't recommend attaching more than 4 things to a short-term assignment like this because it can get overwhelming. Note that the title of the post contains today's date, letting students know that this is the work for today. And I'll also point out that these assignments do not have due dates, which keeps them unsorted in the student's to-do list, which allows students to prioritize work on the to-do list that's coming due soon, like projects from other classes or whatever they have. If you really need to put due dates on these, be sure you've thought through your system and you aren't overburdening your students. My recommendation is to reserve due dates for longer term things, maybe tests or projects that are going to have their own posts, separate from these classwork posts. Also, remember that every new post you make here will push your previous post down in the stream. So a student who doesn't finish the work one day but wants to finish it the next day might need help finding it. So it's a good idea to organize your classwork page with topics that distinguish between today's work and previous lessons. Moving classwork between topics is very simple. You just drag and drop, and you can drag yesterday's work maybe to an archive topic, and you can keep today's work up at the top. If you want to review or reteach a lesson, like if every student seems stuck on something, you can always pull that post back to the top of the stream and direct the class to it that way. It would also be possible in this format to replace the Do Now attachment with a separate question post at the beginning of every class. My own personal approach is to keep everything related to a single topic or lesson in as few posts as possible. But if you really like the question feature, or you find yourself attaching more than 4 things to the main classwork post every time, this might be a better option. But just make sure that you delete the do now every day so that do nows don't pile up in the student's to-do list. I've had check-ins with my advisees in homeroom like in March or April, and I found do nows from October in their to-do list, and that's absurd. Don't be that teacher. So here's the second example. This Google Classroom is making use of hyperdocs for units. Hyperdocs are really popular. I've come across them in lots of online learning trainings I've done, and I know teachers who use them really effectively. A hyperdoc is basically a student-facing document with lots of links to other documents organized in it in a step-by-step way that students can follow to complete the work for a larger scale unit or project. This is more than a single day's worth of work. Lots of teachers I know use hyperdocs to organize their classwork within a single document, and it keeps their Google Classroom really clean and streamlined by really having only one post to the hyperdoc. This frees you up to use the announcements feature more freely without crowding the stream, and you can use questions more frequently as the primary assignment type, of course, besides the hyperdoc. Students know where to find that hyperdoc, and the question posts won't bury it or confuse the stream and classwork pages. Another benefit of this approach is that it lets you personalize the hyperdoc for your unit. Like, you can use colors and outlines and links and all sorts of fun stuff. You can really make it your own using Google Docs or slides if you find that the structure of Google Classroom is too prescribed or restrictive. One major drawback of the hyperdoc method is that you'll only be able to assign one grade to the entire hyperdoc assignment. You're only making one assignment post, so only one column will appear in the grades tab. This means that this approach works for medium or long-term projects that are going to get a grade in and of themselves. I suppose if you wanted to add columns in the grade tab for each step of the way, you could create assignments with no instructions or attachments and instruct students just to turn them in when they complete them in the hyperdoc. But this would really be for your benefit, not theirs, since presumably the hyperdoc itself would already have a checklist for them. If you're going to do this, I strongly recommend heading over to the settings menu and turning off classwork in the stream notifications. Otherwise, students will see you posting and they'll think they need to do something. Plus, any announcement you make will wind up lost in a stream of assignments and students may not even notice it. Still, hyperdocs are very popular with teachers who have students working on the same thing for multiple days, maybe an essay or a project, and teachers who want to provide a lot of reference material in a more organized and accessible format using a document than Classroom itself would allow. Okay, this last example is the one that works best for me, and it's the one that I've developed around the modern classrooms model, which involves self-pacing and frequent mastery checks. You'll notice that my stream is empty, except for a single announcement explaining what students should do when they log into class today. I erase these announcements every day after class and post a new one the next morning, posting it to all of my classes for this particular subject. As I recommended in the hyperdoc method, I keep show classwork in the stream notifications turned off so that only these announcements appear in the stream. My classwork page is divided into currently 5 topics, units 1 through 4, and a resources topic. I'm going to be adding unit 5 soon. Under the resource section, you'll see I have 3 persistent links. 1 to the class pacing tracker and 2 links to Drive folders where I upload drafts and final versions of my students' songs so they can access these folders from here and they share their songs that way, and they can hear each other's work. Under the unit headers, you'll see every lesson for that unit. Within each assignment is a slides presentation posted to make a copy for each student. You could think of this as a stripped-down hyperdoc built using Google Classroom itself, but I find this method to be more beneficial because each one of these lessons gets its own column in the gradebook because it's a separate assignment, and I can build the mastery check into the slides that way, and I can quickly check off the students who have submitted a lesson. Taking a look at my gradebook, it's really easy to see who has submitted lessons. From here, I would just open up the grading tool and give students a 1 out of 1 if they mastered the content, or a 0 out of 1 if they need to revise with me. Once that's done, it's very easy to see which students are doing well and which students need support. One lesson I've learned is to keep the posts simple, and I think this method really distills that approach to its essence. Each lesson post contains just the one attachment, and I don't even write instructions on the posts since they're already included in the slides. Because I'm structuring my classroom in such a step-by-step format, students can just open whatever lesson they're on and find more detailed instructions in the document. Taking a look from the student's perspective, you'll notice that the submitted lessons are grayed out, so it's not hard for them to figure out which lesson to do next. It's the colorful one. It just took a little coaching to develop that routine at the beginning of the year, but now in March, students do it without even thinking about it. This model really makes use of Classroom's organizational features more than like the questions or other interactive pieces of classwork, but I think that it gets Google Classroom out of the student's way so they can get straight to the content. I don't use questions or quizzes. Instead, I'll just build that stuff manually into my slides documents, and I find benefits in this simplicity. But I am leaving a lot of powerful features on the table, and if you can envision using questions and quizzes in your class, you should. Just be sure you're keeping it simple and following a consistent routine so that students know what to expect when they log into your class.